I drove 5 hours for Christmas. My sister opened the door, laughed, and said, "This year's just for family." I turned around without a word. 15 minutes later, her husband accidentally texted me, "Why would that loser even show up?" I smiled, logged in, and terminated every payment I covered. By sunrise, 17 missed calls and one message: "We need to talk." I, 32M, stared at my phone screen as the message notification lit up the dashboard. The irony wasn't lost on me. After driving 5 hours through a snowstorm to get to what I thought would be a family Christmas, I was now parked in a gas station 20 minutes away from their house, reading a text that was never meant for me. The drive had been brutal. Interstate 95 was a nightmare of black ice and abandoned vehicles, but I'd pushed through because family was supposed to matter. My sister had been distant lately, but Mom had passed 3 years ago, and maintaining what little family we had left felt important. I'd brought gifts, expensive ones, and had mentally prepared myself for the usual awkwardness that came with family gatherings. When I pulled into their circular driveway, the house was blazing with warm light. Through the windows, I could see people moving around, laughing, clearly in the middle of Christmas festivities. My brother-in-law's BMW sat next to 2 other cars I didn't recognize, and I felt that familiar knot in my stomach that came with being the outsider in my own family. The front door opened before I could even ring the bell. My sister appeared, took one look at me standing there with my arms full of wrapped presents, and actually laughed. Not a warm, welcoming laugh, but something cold and dismissive. She told me this year was just for family, like I was some random acquaintance who'd shown up uninvited. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd driven 5 hours, through a snowstorm, with gifts, and she was turning me away like I was a door-to-door salesman. I didn't argue, didn't ask questions, didn't beg for an explanation. I simply turned around, walked back to my car, and drove away. The presents stayed in my back seat, a reminder of how thoroughly I'd misread the situation. That's when the text came through. My brother-in-law had accidentally sent it to me instead of whoever he meant to message. The words burned themselves into my memory instantly. "Why would that loser even show up?" Followed by several laughing emojis and something about how they'd specifically planned Christmas without dead weight. I pulled into the gas station and read the message 3 times. Each reading made my hands shake a little more, not from cold, but from pure, concentrated rage. They hadn't just excluded me, they'd actively planned to exclude me, then mocked me for having the audacity to show up. The anger was different from anything I'd felt before. It wasn't hot and explosive, it was cold and calculating. I sat in my car for exactly 15 minutes, letting the full scope of their betrayal sink in. Then I opened my laptop. See, what my sister and her husband didn't know, what they'd never bothered to learn about me, was exactly how much of their comfortable life I'd been quietly subsidizing for the past 4 years. It had started small. My brother-in-law had lost his job right after they bought their house, and they were facing foreclosure. I'd stepped in, not with a loan, but by taking over their mortgage payments directly with the bank. I'd told them it was temporary, just until he got back on his feet. That was 4 years ago. Then there was their son's private school tuition. When they couldn't afford the payments, I'd quietly arranged to cover it. My nephew was bright, and I didn't want his education to suffer because of his parents' financial struggles. Their health insurance premiums when my brother-in-law's new job didn't offer coverage. Their car payments when they'd bought vehicles they couldn't afford. Even their utilities when money got tight. I'd had them transferred to my credit card for convenience. Over 4 years, I'd woven myself so deeply into the fabric of their financial life that they'd stopped thinking about where the money was coming from. They just knew the bills got paid, the mortgage didn't foreclose, and their lifestyle continued uninterrupted. I'd never asked for gratitude, never held it over their heads. I'd just quietly made sure my family was taken care of, because that's what family does for each other. Apparently, I was wrong about what family meant. The gas station's Wi-Fi was strong enough for what I needed to do. I started with the mortgage company's website, logging into the account I'd been managing for years. It took 3 clicks to remove my bank account from their automatic payment system, and another 2 to cancel the upcoming January payment that was scheduled for next week. The private school's payment portal was next. I canceled the auto pay for next semester's tuition and removed my credit card from their system entirely. Then came the health insurance, a quick call to the company to remove my account from their premium payments. Their car payments were handled through 2 different finance companies. Both websites were user-friendly enough that I could remove my banking information and cancel upcoming payments within minutes. The utilities were the easiest part. Electric, gas, water, internet, cable. All of them had been conveniently linked to my credit card for simplified payment processing. I methodically went through each account, removed my payment information, and canceled any scheduled automatic payments. By the time I was finished, I'd effectively severed every financial connection between myself and their household. The beauty of it was the timing. With Christmas falling on a weekend and most businesses closed until after New Year's, they wouldn't discover what I'd done until bills started bouncing in the first week of January. I estimated they had about 10 days before their comfortable world started crumbling around them. The drive home was peaceful. I'd turn off my phone after completing my digital housekeeping, and for the first time in months, I felt completely calm. The snow had stopped, and the roads were clear. I made it home in 4 hours. Update 1. I turned my phone back on around sunrise the next morning. 17 missed calls and 43 text messages were waiting for me. I made coffee and settled in to read the panic in chronological order. The first few messages were from my sister, sent around 11 p.m. the night before. She was asking why I'd left so abruptly, saying there had been a misunderstanding, that I should come back for Christmas morning with my nephew. Then came my brother-in-law's messages, starting around midnight. His tone was different, more aggressive. He accused me of being dramatic and overreacting to what he called a simple miscommunication. The messages got more frequent and more desperate as the night wore on. By 3 a.m., my sister was sending long paragraphs about family and forgiveness and how we needed to stick together after losing Mom. The final message had arrived at 6:47 a.m. We need to talk. I deleted all the messages without responding and made breakfast. My nephew called around 10. He was 16, smart kid, and he'd clearly been coached on what to say. He told me everyone was worried about me, that Christmas wasn't the same without Uncle around, and that maybe I could still come over for dinner. I felt sorry for him. He was genuinely confused about why I'd left, and it wasn't his fault his parents were manipulative users. I told him I loved him, but that I had some things to work through with his parents first. He seemed to understand, which made me respect him even more. The calls kept coming throughout the day, but I ignored them all. I spent Christmas reading, watching movies, and enjoying the complete absence of family drama. It was actually the most peaceful Christmas I'd had in years. Update 2. January 3rd was when reality hit them like a freight train. I was at work when the first panic call came through. I didn't answer, but the voicemail was illuminating. My sister's voice was shaking as she explained that their mortgage payment had been rejected and the bank was calling it a missed payment. She begged me to call her back immediately. The calls escalated throughout the day. By evening, they'd apparently discovered that their health insurance had lapsed, the private school was demanding tuition payment, and their car payment had bounced. I gave them until January 5th to figure out the full scope of their situation before I returned any calls. I wanted them to feel the complete weight of their financial reality without my safety net. When I finally called my sister back, her voice was barely above a whisper. She asked what had happened to all the automatic payments, whether there had been some kind of banking error. I told her there was no error. I explained calmly that I'd removed my financial support from their lives, just as they'd removed me from their family Christmas. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. When she finally spoke, she tried to frame it as a misunderstanding. She claimed they'd been planning a small family Christmas and had intended to invite me to a separate celebration later. The lies came easily to her, but they sounded hollow and desperate. I asked her about her husband's text message. Another long silence. Finally, she broke down crying and admitted that they'd planned Christmas without me because they'd wanted it to be drama-free. She claimed I always brought tension to family gatherings and that they'd just wanted one peaceful holiday. The irony was incredible. I'd been subsidizing their entire lifestyle for 4 years, never mentioning money, never creating drama about their dependence on me. The only tension in our family relationships came from their resentment towards someone they saw as superior, someone who had his life together while they struggled. They'd bitten the hand that fed them, then called that hand dramatic when it stopped providing food. I told her I understood their position completely. They wanted family gatherings without me, so now they could have financial independence without me too. It seemed like a fair trade. Update 3. The begging started in earnest on January 8th. My brother-in-law swallowed his pride and called me directly. He apologized for the text message, claiming it was sent in a moment of stress and didn't reflect his real feelings. He explained that they were facing foreclosure within 30 days and that my nephew would have to leave his school mid-semester. I listened to his entire speech without interrupting. When he finished, I asked him a simple question. If I was such a loser, why was he calling me for help? He stumbled through an answer about family obligations and temporary assistance, but his heart wasn't in it. We both knew he was only calling because he was financially desperate, not because he'd had some sudden realization about my worth as a person. I told him I'd consider helping them under certain conditions. First, they needed to acknowledge in writing exactly how much financial support I'd provided over the past 4 years. I wanted a detailed accounting of every payment, every bill, every expense I'd covered. They needed to face the full scope of their dependence on someone they'd treated like an unwelcome burden. Second, they needed to explain to my nephew exactly why his uncle had been excluded from Christmas. I wasn't going to let them paint me as the villain in this story while simultaneously begging for my money. Third, they needed to apologize publicly to our extended family for excluding me from Christmas. They'd apparently told everyone I'd simply decided not to come, letting people assume I was antisocial or didn't care about family. I wanted the record corrected. The call ended with him promising to get back to me after discussing my terms with my sister. They never called back. Instead, I heard through our aunt that they'd reached out to other family members for emergency loans. They'd apparently crafted a story about unexpected medical expenses and temporary cash flow problems. No mention of the 4 years of support I provided or the real reason for their current crisis. I felt a moment of doubt then. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe family meant swallowing pride and helping people even when they didn't deserve it. Then I remembered standing on their doorstep with my arms full of gifts, driving 5 hours through a snowstorm, and being told I wasn't family. Final update. It's been 6 months now, and they've managed to avoid complete financial collapse, though just barely. My brother-in-law took a second job, they downsized to a smaller house, and my nephew transferred to public school. They're learning to live within their actual means for the first time in years. We haven't spoken since that January phone call. I heard through family that they blame me for their financial troubles. They've apparently convinced themselves that I manipulated them into dependence and then abandoned them out of spite. The narrative they've constructed makes them victims of my calculated cruelty rather than beneficiaries of my generosity who threw it away through their own selfishness. I don't try to correct the story. Let them believe what they need to believe to sleep at night. My nephew reached out on his 17th birthday last month. He thanked me for all the years of support he was only now learning about and apologized for his parents' behavior. He's working part-time to help with family expenses and maintaining excellent grades at his new school. I'm proud of him for handling a difficult situation with such maturity. I told him my door would always be open for him, regardless of his parents' choices. As for my sister and brother-in-law, I've learned something valuable about the nature of family relationships. Real family doesn't just take your money and mock you behind your back. Real family doesn't exclude you from Christmas, then expect you to pay their mortgage in January. I spent 4 years believing that financial support was an expression of love and family loyalty. Now I understand that without mutual respect, generosity becomes enablement, and enablement breeds contempt. They taught me that family isn't just about shared genetics or childhood memories. It's about how people treat you when they think you need them versus how they treat you when they need you. The difference in those two scenarios told me everything I needed to know about my place in their lives. I drive past their old house sometimes on my way to work. The new owners have painted it blue and added a garden where my sister used to park her BMW. It looks happier somehow, more lived in, like a house where people actually appreciate what they have. I'm happier too, though it took time to get here. The anger faded months ago, replaced by something cleaner and more sustainable: indifference. I don't wish them ill, but I also don't lose sleep wondering how they're doing or whether they've learned anything from the experience. That Christmas drive taught me the difference between being alone and being lonely. I'd rather spend holidays alone than with people who see me as a financial resource rather than a family member. Some bridges burn themselves.